I was at a coffee shop this morning, just sort of eavesdropping, as one does.
Guilty. Always.
Right, but the table next to me, they were having the conversation. You know the one.
Let me guess. The AI panic conversation.
Exactly. Two guys looking honestly a little stressed out, talking about how their company just bought a license for some massive new enterprise AI suite. And one of them literally said, and I quote, "I give it 2 years before this software is doing my entire job better than I can."
Yeah. I mean, that's just the background hum of the entire decade, isn't it? That very specific flavor of existential dread.
It really is. It feels like every time you open a news app, the headlines are just screaming about algorithms and mass automation. And the subtext for you, the listener, is always, is my paycheck safe, or am I about to be replaced by a chatbot that costs $20 a month?
It is the defining anxiety of our moment.
Hmm.
And honestly, it's completely valid. We're seeing tools that can write code draft legal briefs, create art in seconds. It feels very different from the technological shifts we've seen in the past.
But today we're actually going to try to turn down the volume on that panic just a little bit.
Yes, we are.
Because I found this stack of research that really helped ground me. We are doing a deep dive into a really comprehensive article by Dr. Jonathan Westover. It's titled Bridging the Gap, AI Exposure and Worker Adaptive Capacity. And I have to say, right off the bat, this research completely flipped my understanding of the whole problem.
It really challenges the dominant narrative. Because usually when we talk about AI, we focus entirely on the technology itself. We look at the shiny new toy and ask, what can the machine do?
Right.
But Westover argues that is actually the wrong question.
Okay, so if what can the machine do is the wrong question, what is the right one?
The right question is, if a machine can do parts of your job, do you have the resources to survive that shift? Westover's research argues we need to look at the human, not just the code.
And that brings us to the two key definitions we need to unpack to really understand this deep dive. The first one is AI exposure. Let's get technical for just a second. What does that actually mean in this context?
So think of AI exposure as a technical scorecard. You look at a job description, say a copywriter or a financial analyst, and you break it down into individual tasks.
Okay.
Then you ask, how many of these specific tasks can a large language model perform right now? If the answer is a lot, well, then that job has high AI exposure.
So that's the scary part. That's the can a robot do it metric. But the second definition is the game changer, right? Adaptive capacity.
Correct. This is the so what factor.
Huh?
Adaptive capacity isn't about the technology at all. It is about the person holding the job. It asks, if your role gets disrupted, do you have the money, the skills, the age profile, and the geographic location to pivot?
That distinction, exposure versus capacity, that was the aha moment for me. Because as we're about to see, you can be highly exposed to AI, but actually be totally fine.
Yeah.
And conversely, you can have lower exposure, but be in serious danger.
That is the crux of the entire argument.
Yeah.
The mission of this deep dive is to move away from those scary headlines and look at who is actually at risk of being left behind and, more importantly, the specific strategies organizations are using to fix it.
So let's start with the landscape, because the sheer scale of this is wild. The article highlights some recent research finding that 80% of the U.S. workforce has at least 10% of their tasks exposed to large language models.
80%.
80%. That is effectively everyone.
It is a staggering number.
Yeah.
It effectively means almost no one is immune. But here is where it gets fascinating. If you look at previous waves of automation, think industrial robots in the 80s and 90s, they came from manual labor. They replaced muscle.
Right. The factory floor, the robotic arm welding the car door.
Exactly. But AI is different. It excels at cognitive tasks.
Yeah.
Pattern recognition, data synthesis, drafting text. So unlike the robots of the past, AI is coming for the white-collar workforce.
And the data totally backs this up. The research points out that the jobs with the highest exposure are actually high-wage, post-secondary educated roles.
Yeah.
We're talking software developers, financial analysts, lawyers, marketing managers.
Yes, because if you think about what a financial analyst does, synthesizing earnings reports, looking for patterns in massive spreadsheets of numbers, that is bread and butter for an LLM.
Right.
Same with a lawyer reviewing standard contracts. These are highly exposed roles.
Which is so counterintuitive. We usually assume technology hurts the lowest paid workers first. But here, the people with the master's degrees are the ones in the crosshairs. So if I'm a lawyer listening to this, should I be panicking?
Well, not necessarily. And this is where we have to apply that second definition, adaptive capacity.
Okay, lay it on us. Why is the lawyer safe?
The research indicates that while about 26.5 million workers have high exposure to AI, roughly 70% of them have strong adaptive capacity.
So even though the AI can do a lot of their work, they have a safety net.
Exactly. Take that lawyer. They likely have a high salary, meaning they have financial savings or liquid wealth, which buys them time. They have a massive professional network, and they possess high-level transferable skills.
So if the AI takes over contract
The
review,
lawyer pivots to high-level strategy or client negotiation. They adapt.
they might have to change how they work. Maybe they aren't billing hours for reading documents anymore, but they aren't going to the unemployment line.
Precisely. They move up the value chain. But then we have to look at the other side of the coin, the danger zone. The research identifies a specific demographic, about 6.1 million workers, who are in a very precarious position.
And this is the part that really struck me in the reading. It's not just an abstract statistic, it's a very specific group of people. Who are these 6.1 million?
According to the demographic analyses in the text, this group is predominantly women. They're largely in clerical and administrative roles, and they face the perfect storm.
High technical exposure to AI combined with low adaptive capacity.
You got it.
So we're talking about the executive assistant, the payroll clerk, the HR coordinator. The AI can technically do a lot of their scheduling or data entry, but unlike the lawyer, they don't have the massive financial cushion or the thick network to just pivot.
Correct. The research breaks down this vulnerability into 4 pillars of adaptive capacity. If any of these are weak, the worker is in trouble. The first and perhaps most immediate is financial security.
This one seems obvious, but explain the mechanism here.
The paper notes that liquid wealth buys you the time to find a good job match.
Right. If you have savings, you can wait for the right opportunity. If you don't, you take the first thing that comes along, even if it pays less or is just a terrible fit.
Exactly. And for low-capacity workers, immediate displacement can spiral into housing or healthcare crises very quickly. It turns a job loss into a life crisis. The second pillar is age.
This one is tough. The research highlights studies showing that older workers, specifically those 55 to 64, are significantly less likely to find reemployment.
Yes, about 16 percentage points less likely compared to workers in their 30s. If you are an administrative worker in your late 50s and your role is automated, that could be a career ender.
Because you face age discrimination.
And you have a much shorter runway to learn entirely new complex skills before retirement.
Then there's geography. The thick versus thin labor market. I love this analogy because I think people forget how much location actually matters.
It's a crucial concept. High-capacity workers, tech workers, for instance, often live in hubs like San Jose, Boston, or Seattle. These are thick markets. If you lose your job, there are 10 other companies down the street hiring for similar skills.
But the vulnerable workers identified in the study.
They are concentrated in smaller metros college towns, and specifically the Mountain West and Midwest. These are thin markets.
So if the major local employer, say a big state university or a regional hospital system, automates their administrative department, there isn't another big employer down the street looking for those same skills.
Well, that makes so much sense. You're stuck.
Yeah.
And the fourth pillar the research touches on is identity and mental health. Losing a role you've held for 20 years, like being the devoted executive assistant who essentially runs the office, that's a massive psychological blow.
It is. It's the loss of professional identity. So when we put all this together, we see that the AI problem isn't really a technology problem at all.
It's an inequality problem.
Yes. The technology hits everyone, but it hurts specific groups much harder because they lack those 4 pillars.
So knowing that, what do we actually do? We can't just throw our hands up. The deep dive isn't just about identifying the problem. Westover's article goes deep into organizational solutions, and it frames it as a choice between augmentation and replacement. This is the single most critical decision corporate leaders are making right now. Replacement is the old model. This machine does the work of 3 people, so let's fire 3 people.
Right.
But augmentation is different. It's the human-in-the-loop model.
The article gave a really great example of this with Microsoft Copilot.
Yes. Microsoft used AI to handle the boilerplate code, the boring, repetitive documentation that developers universally hate. They didn't use it to fire developers. They used it to free up the developers to focus on complex architecture and problem solving.
So productivity went way up, but headcount didn't go down.
Exactly. And we saw a very similar example with JP Chase and their coin system.
Right, the contract intelligence system.
They used AI to review commercial loan agreements. That used to be thousands of hours of human work. Frankly, it was drudgery. But instead of firing the legal ops staff, they retrained them. They moved them into higher value analytical work that the AI just couldn't do.
That seems like the smarter play, not just morally, but for the actual business.
Yeah.
Because if you just fire everyone, you lose something, don't you?
You lose tacit knowledge, institutional memory. You lose the person who knows why the client likes the contract written a certain way or who to call when the data looks weird.
Right.
AI cannot replicate that contextual understanding. Wholesale replacement is actually very risky for companies because it effectively lobotomizes the organization.
So if a company decides they want to do this right, they want to build resilience, what are the concrete strategies? The article mentions participatory planning, which sounds a bit academic, but the concept is actually really cool.
It comes down to procedural justice. Research consistently shows that workers handle change much better when they are involved in the process. It means disclosing automation plans early. It means letting the workers themselves pilot the AI tools.
Instead of some outside consultant coming in and saying, here is your replacement, you say, here is a new tool. Help us figure out how it can make your job easier.
Precisely. It builds trust. You turn the worker from a victim into an architect of the solution. And then you have to back that up with reskilling. And I don't mean just a 2-hour webinar.
Yeah, the AT&T example in the text was massive, their future-ready initiative.
A $1 billion investment. They saw the writing on the wall. Legacy telecom roles were dying. They needed coders and data scientists, so they created a massive internal platform to help workers retrain. It wasn't perfect, and it was incredibly difficult, but it was a massive proactive attempt to move a workforce from the past to the future.
And for the vulnerable group we talked about earlier, the admin roles, the research suggests training in adjacent skills.
Yes, you don't need to turn every administrative assistant into a Python coder. That's not realistic, and it's not necessary. But you can train them in prompt engineering, in quality assurance for AI outputs, or in data interpretation. These are skills that sit right next to the AI.
It's about becoming the pilot of the AI rather than the passenger.
That is a great way to put it.
But there's also the reality that some jobs just will go away, and the article highlights Verizon's approach to that.
Financial bridges. When Verizon shifted toward 5G and fiber, they knew they needed fewer copper network technicians. So they offered enhanced severance and bridge-to-retirement packages.
Right.
They acknowledged that for some older workers, retraining might not be the desired path, so they made the exit dignified and financially secure.
Which brings us to the bigger picture. Companies can do a lot, but they can't do everything. The research argues that we have a serious safety net problem.
We do. Our current unemployment insurance system in the U.S. was built for a completely different era. It was built for temporary manufacturing layoffs. The factory shuts down for a few months, you get a check, then you go back.
It wasn't built for your entire profession has ceased to exist.
Exactly. Structural shifts require different policies. One idea gaining a lot of traction is portable benefits.
I love this idea. Why should your health insurance or your retirement match be tied to one specific employer?
Exactly. If benefits were attached to the worker moving from a full-time role to gig work or taking 6 months off to retrain, wouldn't be so financially ruinous. It reduces the immense risk of transition.
And speaking of retraining, the article takes a real swing at the 1 degree for life model.
The idea that you go to college at 18, get a degree, and that knowledge lasts you until you retire at 65 is totally obsolete. We need systems for continuous learning.
Micro-credentials, right?
Yes. Stackable certifications, short focused courses that prove you have a specific new skill. Organizations and governments need to legitimize these so that a mid-career pivot doesn't require going back for a 4-year degree.
Finally, we have to talk about geography again. We mentioned the thin markets in smaller towns. You can't just tell everyone in the Midwest to move to San Francisco.
No, and you absolutely shouldn't. The research emphasizes geographic resilience. We need place-based support. That means investing in economic diversification for those college towns and mid-sized metros.
Because if a town relies entirely on a university or a state government for employment, and AI disrupts those admin-heavy sectors, the whole town collapses.
Yes. We need to help those regions diversify their industries before the crash happens.
So bringing this all back home, we started this deep dive terrified of the exposure numbers. But what we've learned is that exposure is really only half the battle.
The real metric to watch is adaptive capacity. AI exposure tells us where the technology can go. Adaptive capacity tells us where the suffering will be if we don't act.
And the big takeaway here isn't that mass unemployment is inevitable. It's that the outcome depends entirely on implementation.
It is a choice. We can choose augmentation over replacement. We can choose to invest in the most vulnerable workers, those women in clerical roles, rather than just throwing money at the tech teams who are already fairly safe.
It's about being intentional.
Absolutely. Westover's compilation of all this research makes one thing very clear. We have the tools to make this transition work for everyone. It's just a matter of using them.
Which leads us to a final thought for you listening. We mentioned that we know exactly who the 6.1 million most vulnerable workers are. We know their demographics, we know their job titles, and we know where they live. The data is sitting right there.
It is. We can't pretend we didn't see it coming.
So the question isn't whether AI will disrupt their work. We know for a fact it will. The real question is, do we have the collective will to build that adaptive capacity for them now while the sun is still shining, or are we just going to wait until the storm hits?
That really is the defining question for the next decade of work.
Definitely something to chew on. Thanks for diving deep with us today.
A pleasure as always.